Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Slip Safety Show. My name's Christian Harris and I'm the founder of Slip Safety Services as well as the host of the Slip Safety Show. My guest today is really well known in the field of leisure management. His name is David Monkhouse. He's done many things over the years, as he'll tell us about, both from an operational perspective, but he also sits on the board of CIMSPA, which is the chartered body for managers of leisure facilities. Very well known, liked and trusted in the industry, well connected, and he's got some really valuable and insightful things to share in our chat today. We talked a lot about how to get the leisure world back up and running again after the coronavirus crisis. Some interesting things about inclusivity and participation. And of course, as you'd probably expect, we touched a little bit on cleanliness and hygiene and the importance of those things as well. If you find this interesting, please do subscribe. And if you can think of anybody else that would benefit from joining us on this journey as we talk about the topic of making the world a cleaner, safer, more hygienic place, then I'd really appreciate if you could introduce them to the show. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation with David. David Monkhouse, welcome to the Slip Safety Show.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. You've had me on hashtag Monkhouse Mondays, so I thought it was only fair to return the favour.
Cheers, yeah, thank you very much. And it's become Wednesdays and Fridays as well, lots of, which has been great. And this is a medium I'd never really used before. First ever video when we postponed ActiveNet. I felt really awkward and really difficult, but actually it's been quite well received, so I'm quite pleased.
Yeah, I've done, as you know, a few videos, and I remember like the first few where you're just sort of talking at your phone or your laptop, and you're thinking like I look like such a plonker, and you probably do. But I think it's like anything in life, isn't it? It's just kind of practicing it and getting into it. And I think people are going to be, this whole Zoom thing, I think, is here to stay. People are going to be much more keen to have meetings like this than maybe travel the length and breadth of the country.
No, absolutely. And, you know, I'm just about to put my expenses claim in for April, and there isn't any. Yeah. There's no miles. It's the first time in, it must be 20 years that I've not had a mileage claim. Yeah. It's just incredible. The car just sits there pining, wanting to go somewhere. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I've maybe bought a couple of, you know, odds and sods for, like, I can't remember now. I think I may have bought some sort of light or something to try and, like, right. Not that I need it right now because I've got the sun baking down on me here, but because I've got a south-facing office, or south-east facing. But very very little expenses, which is good. Not great when you don't have any income coming in, I suppose. But I mean, we've got some income coming in, but a lot of companies don't. But do you want to just give anybody that's not familiar with you a quick sort of overview of who you are and what you do?
Oh, blimey, right, okay.
And then that'll give us an hour, and then we'll wrap it up.
I was going to say my CV is quite long. I suppose the easiest way to say it is I've worked in leisure, sport and physical activity in what I would class as the public sector of leisure, so local authorities and contractors and people like that, and been very operational. So started as a lifeguard, you know, the normal way, duty manager, assistant manager, group manager, etc. I suppose my last employed role was with Sports and Leisure Management, so I was Group Customer Experience Manager there. Great organisation to work for, really enjoyed that. Set up my own consultancy, did that for about 5 or 6 years, and then I merged with LeisureNet Solutions. So LeisureNet is an insight company, so we do non-user research and user research. We have platforms to help people get customer comments, net promoter scores, try and recover memberships. We do a lot of on-the-street research, so non-user stuff, which is very interesting. We deliver the National Benchmarking Service for Sport Inc., part of the Quest contract. And then we run an event called ActiveNet, where we bring buyers and suppliers together in the sector for effectively speed dating. Yeah. A couple of days, good fun, nice and professional, good networking opportunities, and from both buyers and suppliers, really enjoy the connectivity that they get from the event. Unfortunately, we had to postpone it. It was supposed to be in March, and we've moved that to the 6th and 7th of July. And I think the other bit of what I do is I get the absolute pleasure of doing things like being an elected member of CIMSPA, so I'm a board member. I support Active IQ through one of their panels. I help what was the Leicester and Rutland Sport, the County Sports Partnership, so I'm on their business and oversight stuff. So I get some real pleasure out of what I do, and some chances to give back, volunteering for hockey clubs and things like that. So really enjoy what I do. It's when I look back over what that 17-and-a-half-year-old thought when he opened his O-level course, it's a totally different place to where I thought I was going to be. So.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got lots of spare time anyway, and there's not much on your to-do list.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? When you always, if you want something done, ask a busy person. And, it is interesting. And I think the hockey volunteering particularly was quite interesting there, and has really got me thinking about how we run junior sport, how we make sport accessible to more, particularly a sport like hockey, which is quite sort of public school biased. You need a decent pitch that's £500,000 to lay, etc. So it's been quite interesting that, but being organised makes all the difference for those types of things. When you've got 56 12-year-old girls all wanting to play hockey and only 7 aside, it does make it quite an interesting challenge. So.
Yes, I can imagine. One of the interviews you've done in your recent series was with Martin Ellison, and some of the stuff he was saying I thought was really fascinating about kind of inclusivity and actually reaching out to non-users, which you've kind of touched on a bit. So I mean, how do you see that having developed over the last few years, and where do you think that might be going? Do you think there's much chance of us kind of reaching out further as a sector?
Martin, I really enjoy my conversations with Martin, and again, it's one of those things, serendipity or what, I don't know, but we live a mile and a half away from each other, so it's really nice to catch up for a quick pint and a lunchtime sandwich. Obviously not at the moment, but we have. And Martin is a real advocate for starting us to think differently about reopening. So not trying to get back to where we were, but trying to do something differently. He talks about universal proportionalism, which is really, really interesting. And it's about, I suppose the easiest way to sum it up is making sure that the bigger resources go to the bigger needs, making those types of things work from that point of view. Of course, it's reinforced by the stuff we do on the National Benchmarking Service, because the two elements of that is efficiency, which is the numbers, the expense, the cost, the income and the usage, but the effectiveness, which is really looking at how good are you as a sports centre in this case, attracting people that are representative of your community, whether they be black minority ethnic, whether they be disabled, whether they be women, or whether they be people from lower socioeconomic groups. And I think the conversations that Martin is now getting others to have, Andy Reid's talked about it, you see Sport England and Tim Hollingsworth talking about it, this is now getting people to actually think, how do we reset in a way that allows us to attract that proportion of the community that we're just not getting into our buildings. And for me, at the moment, I don't think we're talking enough about what actually do these people in the lower socioeconomic groups want? What truly are the barriers to taking part in physical activity? I live in a very nice part of the world. I've got Bradgate Park on my doorstep. My neighbours are all relatively affluent, and we're all running in the park, or we're cycling, or we're taking part in activity. We've got gardens that our kids can play in. And 7 miles down the road, there are some estates that have high-rise flats. What would I be doing now if I was, well, I wouldn't be talking to you now, actually, if I lived in a high-rise flat, because it's unlikely that I'd even have the laptop and the Wi-Fi access.
Yeah.
So it's about trying to, I don't think we can ever put ourselves in people's shoes that are in those groups. We've got to talk to them. We've got to find what it is that will get them to go, well, actually, I saw it on telly every day where the government said we're allowed to take exercise. So what is exercise? What does that mean? What can I do? How can I do it? What will work for me and my family? And I'm not sure we're doing enough of that bit at the moment. There's a lot of people like me and you talking about it, but not necessarily really understanding what the barriers truly are.
Yeah, because you'd immediately think cost, but then actually nowadays there are so many opportunities to go to a leisure centre or a gym for, not much money, however you look at it. You can get a membership for a tenner a month, which I know I know some people don't have huge amounts of money spare, but if you had that desire to exercise, you could afford, I'm sure most, a lot of those people could afford £10 a month, but perhaps they don't. So there's obviously something there that isn't necessarily just about the cost.
Yeah, I don't think it's about cost. I think it's about all kinds of things. I think, my daughter, she's 13, she's very sporty, very physically active. And that's because her mum and dad are. She sees us going out for a run. She sees us taking part in activity. I play hockey with my 13-year-old most Saturdays in something called Badgers, where 2 adults are allowed to play on the pitch. So she's got that. It's already part of everyday life. The Joe Wicks stuff, she's got a Nintendo Switch, so she's doing Let's Dance. And all those things give her that opportunity to do physical activity because she's grown up with that. It's something that's part of life. And I think that's part of it. I think there's another part of it, and it's education. I think so many schools now, PE and sport is something that's really difficult to deliver in a way that attracts all and is inclusive to all. So we're not building that into people's lives. But ultimately, I don't think it is cost because it's choice. Yes, I might have £10 spare, but I've got a series of choices that I've got to make with that £10.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that if I was in a situation where I was struggling to make ends meet, or I was putting 50p into a gas meter, and these are all generalisations because I've never lived these, I don't know what it's like, which is why I say we've got to talk to people. I've got to make a choice of what I do with that £10. And actually, if I've got £10 spare, perhaps actually that's a treat. Perhaps that's a McDonald's, perhaps that's an ice cream, perhaps that's a bus journey to Bradgate Park or wherever it happens to be. It's a treat. It's not necessarily going to be treating myself to regular exercise. So that's why I think the universal proportionalism comes in, because actually, how do we help with that choice by saying, well, actually, you, Christian, and you, David, you actually don't need our support and our help, but somebody else needs twice as much. So we're going to take that from you and we're going to give it to them so that they don't have to make that choice of a treat and a £10 membership. Actually, they can have both.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's very easy to generalise, and I will keep coming back to it. We need to start having conversations with the communities we're now talking about trying to include in our physical activity. And then, of course, we've got to actually make it really accessible, and it's got to be delivered and communicated and proportionate by a voice that's similar to theirs.
Yeah.
The chances of me going into some of the estates around here and getting people to take part in a physical activity session, a boot camp or whatever it happens to be, are slim. If we could motivate, train, develop an individual who's already in that community to do this, then I think we stand a better chance. There's a really good project in Leicester called with the Asian Elders, where they've helped get a number of the elders to get a cricket level 1 and 2 qualification, and now they deliver cricket in their environments. And I think for me that is almost the actual key. It's getting a voice like the voice that people know and recognise and respect, and getting that voice to talk about physical activity or whatever it happens to be. So I think there's some work to be done in finding these people, in talking to these people, finding out what they really want and really need, and then trying to apply some of the stuff we all know and love and getting other communities to have the same passion.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And how would you square the circle? Big question potentially, but how could we square the circle around, the likes of the third-party contractors versus, say, a trust? A trust, being a charity, has a bigger mission than just to operate a facility and turn a profit. In fact, they might not even want to turn a profit or might not be able to turn a profit. Whereas, obviously, the third-party contractors are private companies and they're trying to maximise value for their shareholders because legally that's what they have to do as a business. And I mean, is that going to cause some challenges around, the choice between having a trust model or a contractor model if you're a council?
It's a really interesting one, and we work across the board. We work with local authorities, we work with trusts, and we work with contractors, and finding the right balance in there is you're not squaring off a circle. This is far bigger than that. I think one of the things that may come out of this as a result of the work that certainly UK Active, Sport England and Community Leisure UK are doing at the moment, I think there's a real opportunity to understand the value of physical activity delivered by whoever, because I think a multiple methodology around delivery really, for me, helps the marketplace we're getting value for money as well. And you know, I've worked in this sector an awful long time, and I've worked for local authorities, and I've worked in the private sector. And you know, I can always recall, you know, when I worked for sports and leisure management, you know, I had responsibility for, when I left, 56 sites for health and safety, for quality, for training and development, for human resources, and you know, I did some IT in there as well. And I used to go along to local authorities, and they'd want to interview your HR director, or they'd want to interview your health and safety manager, or they'd want to interview the guy or the girl who was delivering training and development and quality across all of these leisure centres. And you keep saying, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me. And all of these local authorities would have an individual that did that. You know, and that economy of scale that you're able to generate by creating this environment has made a difference. You know, leisure centres, there's a local leisure centre to me that back in '94 was costing 1.5 million to the authority a year to run, and is now generating nearly £500,000 a year. You know, that's a £2 million swing. That's a lot of money. So we can't kick all of that out. We can't put the baby out with the bathwater. But at the same time, we have to go back to doing something different. We have to see the value, and we have to recognise that value. We have to find a way that contracts, whether that be with a trust or whether that be with a local authority, or whether that's a soft contract with the trust or the local authority operator. You know, what is it that we're there for? What are the outcomes? And what are we as a community prepared to pay those outcomes? And that shape and change those pieces. I'm very much of a person that believes in the marketplace. And, you know, ultimately, if the marketplace demands it, then to some extent, the private sector should step in and deliver that demand. If the community isn't demanding it, and there is more supply than there is demand, then we've got to find a way of increasing that supply. And that's when we start looking at the social value, and that's when we start looking at the outcomes of doing what we do and why we do it. I honestly can't see a square in the circle. I think we can start moves towards it. I think we can start looking very differently at it. But all of those delivery models have their value, and it depends on, you know, how austerity has affected that local authority. It depends on the financial capability of the communities within those local authorities. You know, as yet, we don't see somebody going out there and going, right, okay, I'm going to raise 50 million quid and I'm going to build a leisure centre. They don't do it. They don't go to sport. They don't do that without going to Sport England, without going to their local authority. They're not attempting to build a leisure centre themselves as a private individual. Yes, they'll build gyms, and yes, they might put swimming pools in it. And to be fair, David Lloyd get pretty close when you start looking at the rackets and all of that stuff they offer. But that says something. If the supply side of it isn't doing it off its own back, then, you know, can these places continue to operate as a profit-making centre for some of the contractors?
Yeah, if you think of McDonald's as an analogy, you know, there's people are queuing up to buy McDonald's franchises and build new McDonald's because there's a huge demand there, and they know that they can make a return, and it's a good investment of their time and effort and capital. So yeah, we need to try and figure out how to turn a leisure centre into that, or to think about more creative ways of delivering, which isn't necessarily in a leisure centre, but could be in the community or digitally or some sort of hybrid, which nobody really knows about yet. But, you know, there's all sorts of exciting possibilities out there. Anyway, we've put the world to rights. I'm quite interested to talk about the net promoter score stuff that you do and the feedback, and you know, to what extent is that kind of the gold standard now, or is there still a long way to go to generate further interest and uptake of that, would you say?
Yeah, I think if I take feedback first, it's a real frustration for me that organisations don't see the value in making it as easy as possible for customers to give them some feedback. You know, roughly 1 in 25 customers will tell you what the issue is. The other 24 just disappear. So making it easy for them to give you some feedback and then acting on that feedback is really important. And if you are an operator with 56 sites, you know, okay, one site might get one complaint, but if 56 sites get one complaint about the same subject, you've got a trend.
Yeah.
How do you pick that up? How do you see that if you don't really truly buy into collecting feedback and dealing with it? So I think we've still got a long way to go on communication, customer feedback. I think Net Promoter Score definitely has got a much stronger hold in our sector. I think it's simple. It's a single question on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to refer or recommend? I think if you use closed loop properly, it also becomes a sales tool. So closed loop means if somebody gives you 0 to 6, you find out why they're a detractor. If somebody gives you a 7 or 8, what would it take to get you to be a 9 or a 10? A 9 or 10, brilliant. Who would you refer us to? And it becomes a sales tool. So actually, there's a lot of value in that. It's more than just the number. I think the biggest value of Net Promoter Score is, of course, you can attempt to align your score to the brand you want to identify with. So you could say, I want to be a Nissan car. So what's the score and how do I compare? You could say, no, I want to be a Mercedes. So what's their score and where do you go? So you can really look at those brands that you want your brand to identify with. And you can start looking at what their scores are. So you can set yourself some really interesting targets around that. We do this with some quite big operators with multiple sites around the country. And the really interesting bits that are coming out of it are those sites that respond back quickly to their closed loop Net Promoter Scores always get a higher Net Promoter Score.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and what it is, it's a reflection of the management style. It's a reflection of the effort and activity that the teams put in on those sites to make sure those customers really, truly are getting a fantastic experience that to some extent is being personalised to those individuals because that's what gives them a higher score. And that then also means that as soon as they do get a comment coming with it, then they're happy to deal with it, they want to deal with it, they want to learn, they want to listen. And it's just a really great insight into culture, into the management emphasis on communication to customers. So yes, I think is getting much more purchase. I think from our point of view, we love doing that. Last year I think we did 48,000 Net Promoter Score surveys across all of our customers. An average in the sector of about 43%, which is really actually quite good. There's a good result in there. So from our point of view, it's a great benchmarking tool. We can help others understand what that means. But for me, the ultimate bit is that insight into culture. If you were an operator looking at 10 of your sites and you can see one at 60% or one at minus 20%, you know where your challenges are. You can start then applying resource where it's needed. You could actually, that site that's scoring the highest score, to start talking to the lowest scoring site about what they do and how they do it. And, you get that internal learning, that internal growth. And it's just, it's really exciting to see. And I think Net Promoter, so easy, so simple, so cheap to do. But actually, if you really look at what you get, there's some really interesting stuff that can come out of it.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of research that shows that in a sales environment, or business to business or business to consumer, if you get an inquiry and you respond to it immediately, your chances of successfully selling, whatever it is, product or service that person was inquiring about, are dramatically higher than if you take a bit longer to get back to somebody. I know that's probably been heightened in the kind of digital world, whereas 10 years ago people wouldn't think anything of waiting. I think now people expect that kind of instant gratification, but it sounds very, very well aligned to what you're talking about there. And are companies, taking it that step further? So are they doing that kind of analysis you just talked about, and then buddying up sites? And I suppose that's kind of the role that you're helping to fulfill, is it to guide them and shape how they're doing it?
Absolutely, that's how we facilitate what we do. I think I'm not going to mention names, but we're working with an organisation that's a franchise, and we're helping them to understand which of those particular franchises are doing well and which ones aren't doing so well. Where is the opportunity? We're part of feedback on a quarterly basis. We report to the managing director of the organisation. They actually sell motorhomes. Even it is in the leisure sector, but it's not in the traditional sector. And this is helping that person who owns the franchise to understand what's going on around his business. And of course, the biggest piece for them is the opportunity to sell on. If somebody actually gives a really good referral when they're buying a 40 grand motorhome, then actually, there's a big opportunity there for another sale as a result of the referral.
Yeah.
So, it's been really interesting. And that whole sort of quarterly facilitation that we do with their results, with what we're finding out from it, how we're helping them, and a bit of consultation, I don't know very much about motorhomes, but it's amazing what you know about business, and you know about how people operate, you know how different approaches to the experience can make all the difference to a purchase or not.
Yeah, and we did a bit of analysis on some of the NBS data around the correlation of Net Promoter Score and cleanliness and stuff. Have you done any other types of analysis like that? I mean, is it fair to say that, you know, if somebody scores a much higher Net Promoter Score, then it is indicative that they're running a business well, they're likely to be making more sales and more profit, or is it that closely aligned, would you say?
It is. Net Promoter is one of the scores that you get in NBS, and there is an alignment between a good Net Promoter Score and a good efficiency score. So good subsidy or reduction, sorry, good reduction in subsidy or creating profit. So there is alignment between those two. There's an awful lot of other things in there as well, and I think filtering out the other things. And other things are things like location, for example. Certain sites in the right location that have been built, designed correctly, built correctly, programmed correctly, managed correctly, will always do well, efficiency, and will always actually do well around Net Promoter because they explain it to their customers. Customers understand what it's all about. They take time to share the results and things like that. You said we did boards, and all those types of things all contribute. So you can't do a direct correlation between efficiency and Net Promoter Score. But if you look just coldly at it, absolutely, high Net Promoter Score will always lead to a high efficiency score. Yeah,
it's challenging, isn't it? Because I remember talking to at the time the CEO of what were they called, Tempest Leisure, who ran Cornwall Trust, and he said, it's just because of the geography and the demographics and the spread, it's just almost impossible to make any money operating these centres because there just isn't the amount of people there in the area. So they could well have had very good customer service and and a very good Net Promoter Score, but they still wouldn't have been maybe as profitable as somebody that it was in a better location with a better sort of target audience that made more profit.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why the National Benchmarking Service has family groups that you can look at, so you get a fair comparison, so that you try to level out the playing field as much as you can. So you can compare on the percentages of the low socioeconomic groups, you can compare on size of building, you can compare on type of building, so wet and dry, and that really helps you to be able to compare like for like. So you wouldn't be comparing one of those sites in Cornwall with a site in London, for example.
Yeah.
So that you get a fair balance. But of course, at the end of the day, if numbers are cold, you need context. You need to understand that, and that, down in Cornwall, as soon as the sun's shining, the waves are out, everybody's on the beach surfing, and that includes the staff, let alone the customers. You've got a lot of challenges that are very different in very different locations, and that's why benchmarking can be quite difficult, why you have to put quite a lot of effort into benchmarking. And one of the changes that we made to the benchmarking was to allow to choose what the core priority was of the business. So if the core priority of the business was to provide service, no matter how much it cost, you can compare yourself with others that have got the same priority. And that was really quite useful because that started to really level out the playing field when you were comparing or trying to compare like for like, so that you get activity from it.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing is, really, you should be comparing yourself against yourself. So if you invest in this and buy into it and track yourself over a period of time, and you can see you're slowly improving, then that's, if anything, that's showing you the most useful information than comparing yourself to another centre somewhere else.
Yeah, it can be. But as a general manager, I've already got my list of excuses as to perform better this time, and a budget club opened up down the road. I won't tell you about the housing estate with 1,000 new houses on it, but the budget club did open up down the road. And again, it's all about that context, isn't it? It's what are the contributing factors to performance, and things like Net Promoter Score are really useful because you can still get a Net Promoter Score whether you ask 20 customers or 2,000 customers. You can still get that feel for it. We'd always say you'd need about 300 to really make a valid point, but you can still do that. You can still do that comparison on piece. And of course, the other bit that we've not talked about in all of this is how staff feel. And staff attitudinal surveys can be a real indicator as to whether or not the experience that the customers get in are consistent or up to brand standards. But more importantly, do the team really value those customers and those customer needs? And I think that, well, for me, is a really interesting indicator. I love the balanced scorecard and having that staff quartile in there, and something in your staff quartile that gives you a litmus test about how people are feeling at the moment. I think it's really important.
Yeah. One of the things that Virgin Active certainly did, I imagine they still do, they have their own cleaning staff, but they call them member care. And one of the things they do as part of their training is they kind of put up on a screen pictures of all the different people in the club. So, general manager, AGM, sales manager, operations manager, PT, blah, blah, blah. And they ask them, they ask the member care to kind of rank the importance of these people. And typically they put themselves, right at the bottom. And then they run through various scenarios of, the sales manager showing somebody around and there's a big puddle on the floor or some dirt on the floor or something, or somebody's hurt themselves and needs some help, or somebody needs a tap, and they kind of just play up all these different scenarios to show actually that you're fulfilling a really important customer service role as well as your functional role of cleaning and maintaining the facility. And that, I saw that as a really effective way of trying to boost that morale and kind of get the team aligned in one direction.
Absolutely. It's really, we had one of the sites I used to manage, as well as doing all those other things I did for that business, which was always interesting when you got dropped into a venue because you needed to cover a general manager. We used to commission birthday party sales. And I had a absolutely brilliant member of the cleaning team who had a little envelope almost stuck to a mop bucket, and in it would be party flyers with her reference on, because that's how we used to pay it. She used to generate more birthday parties than any other team member. And it was because she was in an environment where customers were. So she talked to them, she smiled, she knew birthdays, she knew about dogs, she knew about holidays and all those types of things. Bloody good cleaner as well, really good cleaner. But because she could build that rapport, that she was able to sell effectively. Yeah. And I think part of our challenge, particularly in the sort of the local government side of what we do in our sector, is selling's a dirty word. And often when I do learning and development around sales, I don't call it sales, I call it increasing participation. All I'm trying to do is get people to realise that what they're doing is getting more of their community to take part in physical activity in their building. Yes, that leads to a sale. That might be a gym membership, it might be a squash court, it might be a badminton court. And I think the word selling has the connotation of, I don't know, double glazing, stood in, handing out. We've got to realise that the way we behave, the rapport we build, our enthusiasm for what we've got, the passion and the pride for what we do, will encourage others if we use that in a positive way.
And also, I think, it's kind of what you're selling, because, I've read a lot of sales books and so on over the years. And one of the things that really stuck with me was you need to be finding something that you believe in, that works. And actually kind of, if you had the cure for cancer, would you be selling it? Well, of course you would. And actually, from a leisure perspective, well, if you said you could give somebody a longer life, a healthier life, much lower chance of disease, and so on and so on and so on, would you be wanting to shout from the rooftops and sell that? Well, yeah, you would, and that's exactly what they're offering, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the culture of the organisation, and the culture is demonstrated by the team, by the people that are doing things. And when organisations get it right, it's really good to see. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be remiss of me not to just talk a little bit about cleanliness and things like that, because obviously that's what people are going to expect, at least a proportion of this. So how do you see the importance of cleanliness kind of now in lockdown time and moving into the new world, whatever that might look like, and how have you seen it kind of develop over your time in the industry? Has it always been on the back burner and now it's really important, or has it always been important and now it's the same, or how do you see that?
It's really interesting because you say in my career, I remember my first job, part-time lifeguard, which indoor swimming pool, and on a weekend, on a Saturday and Sunday, we used to close for an hour at lunchtime, and we used to clean the changing rooms, clean the poolside, clean the toilets, clean the showers. Don't tell anyone, but go down the pub, have a couple of pints of cider, and get back. And that was the value we put on it. It was that important to us to clean. We shut for an hour.
Yeah.
So I actually think we were probably cleaner back then than we are now. And I think the reason for that is financial, effectively. We are being challenged so much around the efficiency side. There is no way on this planet now we would close for an hour our buildings in order for them to be cleaned. So I think we've gone through a lot of planning, a lot of structuring, a lot of understanding the chemicals that we need, the volume cleaning, schedules. Quest has been brilliant at getting to think about all those things. But they've always been in the context of getting it to a point where you reduce complaints rather than where actually it's clean because it's clean. I think what we're seeing going forward, I think we'll have a whole load of customers who will not come back to us because of that issue around social distancing, around cleanliness, those types of things. Yellow grout in showers will no longer be acceptable. It's just not going to happen anymore. I think the close down period should be the moment where we go, right, okay, actually, not only are we reviewing what we did in the past and what have we got to do in the future, but it's a great opportunity actually to get a deep cleaning. And more importantly, things like baselines for energy and stuff like that. When have ever had this opportunity where our buildings aren't open and we can really understand how much gas, electric and water we're actually using as a baseline without any flipping customers or staff in the building? So I think there's a good opportunity around that. And start seeing what they're talking about, in the gyms in Singapore and places like that. So, they're talking about 100 square feet per customer. They're talking about every other machine being turned off. They're talking about body temperature scanners as you walk in to see if you've got temperature or not. Learning and development for customers, which of course means learning and development for staff around, how to interact and how to work with people and how to demonstrate cleanliness. Cleaning every machine after every use. This is going to be labor intensive without a huge amount of customers in the door. So there's a real balancing out there between income and expenditure and being able to do that. And more importantly for me, I don't think we do enough to really give our customers confidence that actually we're good at what we do, that we've put all this thought in. When again, I'll look back on my time with SLM, we had a single chemical contractor who would help our personal protective equipment with all the chemicals that we bought, with all the learning and development that we needed, with all of our COSH assessments, all our risk assessments. We had 56 sites that were cleaned with the similar chemical in a similar way with similar resources. But I think the bit I always I wasn't really happy and confident with was the deep clean. Was when do I do level stuff? When do I do the getting rid of the lime scale if I happen to unfortunately have a pool in an area that's got hard water in it? And recognizing actually, I think the bit I suppose I've learned is actually the lime scale in particular, because it's so hard, it attracts dirt and it makes it harder to clean and it gets dirtier quicker. And I don't think I realised that. Perhaps I needed a bit more learning development around the whole chemistry or the whatever you want to call it, the physics of it, because it is physics, I guess, because it's friction, things like that as well. So that's the bit where perhaps we need to up our game a little bit. Is that real intelligence?
I mean, I was trying to come up with an analogy, and we're both in a leisure sector group on Facebook, and I posted it in there to try and think of a way of getting that across, because you're quite right that the cleaner a surface is, then the easier it is to maintain. But if you've got any contamination in it, that's going to act as a magnet for more contamination, particularly if like the likes of limescale, and it's going to mean that the benefit of your deep clean is going to not be as long lasting. So it's important to kind of do that deep cleaning really well as you possibly can. And so I've been trying to think of an analogy for that. I haven't quite got to one yet, but we'll have to see if we can come up with something. But I think that confidence word is really interesting, because what I see is that lots of clubs I go to, actually, the majority of the club is very good in terms of cleanliness, but they let themselves down with the showers, or they let themselves down with the changing rooms. And as soon as you've got some evidence of something that isn't quite right, that reduces your confidence as a member in the other areas. It's a bit like going to a restaurant and, you know, the toilet is kind of grubby, and it makes you think, oh, if they can't clean the toilet, you know, what are they doing in the kitchen?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I'm not sure actually that people notice grubbiness. I think it is a bad smell, and then they look for what's creating that smell. And so that doesn't mean that all we do is put nice smells into the toilets and changing rooms and it causes, you know, it takes away the issue. But I have a fundamental belief that actually it's the first thing that affects you, that you sense around cleanliness, is smell. And as soon as the smell isn't what you consider acceptable, then you almost you're looking for what's causing that smell. Why is it smelly? And then you get the grubbiness and things like that. So there's the use of bleach. You know, I like health and safety, obviously, but the whole thing around the smell of bleach and things like that, it just gives people confidence. It gives people confidence that you've done something, that you're trying, that it's clean, because everybody's used to that at home. And I think, you know, any chemical supplier out there that could make a chemical that isn't bleach but smells like bleach.
Well, it's like in hospitals, isn't it? You have that sort of bleachy smell in a hospital, and so you kind of perceive it as being clean. Actually, you know, lots of hospitals in lots of areas are very clean, but there's lots of improvements that could be made in other areas. So yeah, I think you're right there. The other thing that we've discussed before, which I think is an interesting point and worth bringing out, is the piece around the vulnerability and the kind of fact that you're stationary. So if you're in the shower, because showers always comes up, you know, towards the top of the list of areas where people find complaints around cleanliness. And I think part of that is because you're in a state of undress and you're stationary, and you're kind of perceiving your surroundings a bit more, and you've got that kind of, if there is a bit of grubbiness on the wall, and you kind of you can touch it with your bare skin, and it's, you know, not very nice.
Absolutely, it's not very nice, and you know, I'll never forget my daughter saying to me once, "Dad, why do they always use yellow grout in showers?" Nail along the grout and said it's not, it's body. And I think that was probably the last time she went swimming. You're right, and it's, you know, things like hair in drains and all of those types of stuff. It is, people feel incredibly vulnerable in those types of environment. And actually, if you stand in a reception area of a leisure centre for an hour, it's incredible how many people come in their exercise kit, leave in their exercise kit. Definitely take part in those spaces within our buildings anyway. Partly time, I know that, but it is also going to be the environment in which they find themselves, and vulnerability around being naked or semi-naked, and as you say, stationary. Yeah, you're right. It gives people more time, more thoughts around what this actually looks and feels like to use.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because I assume a leisure centre would look at it this way as well, but I know in a retail environment like a shopping centre, it's all about dwell time, so they want people to stay longer there, because they know that if they do, they're going to spend more money. So if you've got somebody that's coming in their workout gear, working out and leaving straight away, there isn't an opportunity to sell them a coffee or sell them, you know what I mean, or upsell them on some other kind of experience when they're there. So you're potentially missing out on revenue opportunities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're much more likely, as you say, you know, I'm not going to sit and have a coffee in my workout gear. That's just isn't going to happen. I'm like, if I have a shower and I feel fresh, then maybe I will sit and have a coffee and a sandwich before I go back to work, or whatever it happens to be. But yeah, it's a really interesting concept, that whole link to secondary sale around dwell time. And actually, I think you've hit on a really interesting point. I think we can be quite insular, and we tend to look in our businesses, in our sector, rather than looking outside of the sector and what is the opportunity out there. And the whole digital movement that we've made in the last 6 weeks, because we've had to, you know, you've got to look at blockbusters, you know. The whole piece around going online and streaming is effectively what we've done. We've copied it, but how many years ago was that? There are some great digital products out there, though, to be fair. You know, there's some really good organisations doing very, very good prior to COVID. on the online stuff. But it's interesting, the take-up was so slow when that was first launched.
Yeah, people are reluctant to change, aren't they, to be fair? And I think it's a bit of an existential question around, do you want to be encouraging people, if we hadn't had a lockdown, would you want to be encouraging people not to come to the centre, to the gym? You probably wouldn't, because you'd be fearful about what that means. But I think actually there is an opportunity to sort of take a step back and take a wider view, and probably be able to increase participation and generate some different types of revenue, or maybe some stronger revenue from fewer people.
Absolutely, but flip that coin. I bet you there's a whole load of blokes out there that have tried Zumba and aerobics and all kinds of things in the last 6 weeks that never would have gone into a dance studio. And they just wouldn't. So actually, this is an opportunity for those people who are a bit shy, who would never have done it. That could have been a new marketplace for us. It doesn't have to move the marketplace from our group exercise studio onto a digital platform. It's actually more people getting onto that digital platform, because they never would have got a group exercise studio. They never would have gone through the embarrassment of being in there. And sometimes hindsight's a marvelous thing, but there is a lot of opportunity that if we use hindsight properly from where we're going through, that actually we could make some real difference to people.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of time, and you're being very generous with your times, but just thought it'd be useful to give us a bit more of an overview about ActiveNet, how that works, how people could get involved, a bit about the Scotland event as well, perhaps, and then if there's any other innovations or products that you're offering that you think would be particularly of interest to people to have a look at, then we could touch on those a bit as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, ActiveNet is in its 7th year. It'll be at Eastwood Hall on the 6th and 7th of July in Nottingham. We've currently got, I think it's 52 different suppliers, fitness equipment suppliers, marketeers, drowning detection systems, and we've got 53 different organisations, from the local government, from trusts, from contractors, from colleges, from universities. And effectively what we do is we schedule 16 20-minute meetings over a day and a half. We always do some CPD, some continuous professional development at the beginning, and we're talking about Generation Z as part of our sort of CPD stuff. And we always have a networking meal with an after-dinner speaker. So that will happen 6th and 7th of July. And to some extent, it's an interesting, what happens is the suppliers stay where they are, the buyers go to the table. Every 20 minutes we organise it, we obviously structure it. But what we try to do really hard is to make sure that the buyers get as many of their choices as they want. So they sit down with you, the supplier, and say, look, I know what you do, I know how you do it, can you help me? And it just changes the dynamic on the conversation. We've built a really good relationship with the Scottish Leisure Networking Group in Scotland. And we've decided to do an event up in Scotland. So we're going to the Crieff Hydro on the 9th and 10th of September. Place. Yeah, it is very nice. Yeah, my 13-year-old's a little bit disappointed because she's 14 on the 9th. And Daddy will be there, so Daddy's in trouble. And what we've got is already 23 of the trusts and universities in Scotland signed up as buyers. I think we've got about 22 suppliers actually that are coming up so far for that. I have to say this whole issue of lockdown has slowed us down on our marketing.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But the event will still go ahead. We're really looking forward to going up to Scotland and delivering a great event for Scotland. So that's ActiveNet. It seems to have grabbed the attention. People seem to like the way we do it, the way it's organised, the effort we put in. Just as an example, on day one of the event last year, I walked 14 kilometres, just with people, moving people around, finding why they weren't at meetings, that type of stuff. So yeah, my pedometer went mad that day, which is great. And we're really proud of ActiveNet. I think it's been a success for us. And most importantly, though, it makes a difference, because if we introduce one organisation that has 10 leisure centres to a new supplier, and that new supplier provides a product, so they've made a sale, but more importantly, every single customer of those 10 leisure centres has now got a different experience, has now got something better, something different. And I think when you scale it up, I think that's what we're most proud about, is the difference that we make to operators and to their customers, their end users.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can see that exactly, because that's kind of the feeling that I have as well. It's about what we do. It's kind of all about actually making environments better and safer and customer experience. And, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning, and making that difference. Because when I was in a